Welcome to Brainish English Stories.
All that day, actually from the moment of his creation, Sweller had behaved quite well in my eyes. I had to make some agreements, but he was also considerate. Sometimes we disagreed on certain behaviors, but generally, we compromised. Our first argument happened during his morning routine. Sweller confidently explained, "I usually ring for a drink and then take a bath. I splash in the water, of course. When Tommy Carmichael visits for a chat about polo, I can talk to him through the bathroom door, or I can be eating a grilled bone brought in by my man. What do you prefer?" I smiled with satisfaction at his upcoming trouble. "Neither," I replied. "You will show up when a gentleman should, fully dressed behind closed doors. And I hope your manners are good enough so that we don't have to tell the public you've taken a bath." Sweller looked a bit offended. "Well, okay," he said. "I think it concerns you more than me. Cut the tub if you think it's best. But it's been the usual thing, you know." I won this time, but after Sweller came out from his rooms in the Beaujolais, I lost in many small arguments. I allowed him to smoke a cigar but won on the question of its brand. However, he beat me when I didn't want him to wear a coat unmistakably English in its cut. I let him stroll down Broadway, and even allowed people passing by to turn and admire his figure. Later, he went to the club and saw Freddie Vavasseur, polo team captain, enjoying grilled bone number 1. "Dear old boy," started Sweller, but I quickly grabbed him by the collar and pulled him aside with little courtesy. Sweller's talk annoyed me. "Speak like a man," I said sternly. "Using those mushy words is not manly. That man is not dear, old, or a boy." Surprisingly, Sweller looked pleased. "I'm glad you said that," he said heartily. "I used those words because I've had to say them often. They're contemptible. Thanks for correcting me, dear old boy." Still, I have to admit that Sweller's behavior in the park that morning was almost perfect. His courage, dash, modesty, skill, and loyalty made up for everything. Now, let me tell you the story. Sweller was part of the Rugged Riders, a group famous for making war with another country. Among his friends was Lawrence Arun, a man Sweller liked. A strange and risky thing happened in the story. Sweller and Arun looked very similar in their faces, bodies, and appearance. After the war, Sweller used his connections, and Arun became a mounted policeman. One night in New York, old friends celebrated, and in the morning, mounted policeman Arun, not used to strong drinks, another risky idea in fiction, found the ground moving like a bronco. He had no stirrup to save his honor and badge. Noblesse oblige? Definitely. So, out trots Hudson Sweller in his comrade's uniform, looking very much like him. It's all fun for Sweller, who's rich and important enough to safely act as a police commissioner doing his duty if he wanted. But society, not interested in studying mounted policemen's faces, sees nothing strange about the officer on duty. Then comes the runaway. Picture it, a swaying Victoria, wild horses charging through scattered vehicles, a confused driver holding broken reins, and Amy Folliot, her ivory-white face clinging desperately with each slender hand. Fear is gone, leaving her expression pensive and a bit pleading, for life isn't so bitter. Now, the noise and dash of mounted policeman Sweller. Oh, it was, but the story hasn't been printed yet. When it is, you'll read about how he sent his horse like a bullet after the endangered Victoria. A Crichton, a Croesus, and a centaur in one, he throws this unbeatable combination into the chase. When the story is printed, you'll love the exciting scene where Sweller stops the charging team. And then he looks into Amy Folliot's eyes and sees two things: the chance for happiness he's been seeking and a growing promise of it. She doesn't know him, but he stands in her sight shining with the hero's strong glory. According to the golden, affectionate, and illogical laws of love and light literature, she's his, and he's hers. That's a special moment. It'll excite you to learn that in that important time, Van Sweller thinks of his buddy Arun, who's cursing his spinning bed and unsteady legs in a West Side hotel room while Van Sweller holds his badge and honor. Van Sweller hears Miss Folliot's voice thrillingly asking for her savior's name. If Hudson Van Sweller, in his police uniform, saved the life of the pulsating beauty in the park, where is mounted policeman Arun, in whose territory the deed is done? How fast can the hero reveal himself with a word, throwing away his masquerade and adding to the romance? But there's his friend. Van Sweller tips his cap. "It's nothing, miss," he says, strongly, "that's what we're paid for, to do our duty." And off he goes. But the story doesn't end there. As I mentioned, Van Sweller did well in the park scene, much to my satisfaction. He was a hero even to me when he gave up the romantic promise of his adventure for his friend's sake. Later in the day, during the stricter rules that surround the society hero, we had our strongest disagreement. At noon, he went to Arun's room and found him well enough to return to work, which he promptly did. Around 6 o'clock in the evening, Van Sweller looked at his watch and gave me a cunning look. "Time to dress for dinner, old man," he said, with exaggerated carelessness. "Very well," I answered, without giving him any hint of my suspicions. "I will go with you to your rooms and make sure you do everything properly. I guess every author must be a valet to his own hero." He pretended to cheerfully accept my somewhat bossy suggestion to accompany him. I could tell he was bothered by it, and that made me more convinced he was planning some act of betrayal. Once in his rooms, he said to me with a condescending tone, "There are quite a few little special touches in the dressing process, as you may know. Some writers rely on them a lot. I guess I'm supposed to ring for my man, and he's supposed to come in quietly, with an expressionless face." "He can come in," I said firmly, "and only come in. Valets don't usually enter a room shouting college songs or with a St. Vitus's dance on their faces. So we can assume the opposite without unnecessary exaggeration." "I must apologize," continued Van Sweller, gracefully, "for bothering you with questions, but some of your methods are a bit new to me. Should I wear a fancy suit with a really white tie, or is there another tradition to be overturned?" "You'll wear," I replied, "evening dress, like a gentleman. If it's too full, blame your tailor. And I'll let your supposed knowledge decide if a white tie gets any whiter by being immaculate. And whether a tie that's not white, and therefore not immaculate, could ever be part of a gentleman's evening dress, I'll leave to your conscience. If not, then the perfect tie is included in the term dress, and saying immaculate adds either too many words or envisions a man wearing two ties at once." With this gentle but necessary correction, I left Van Sweller in his dressing room and waited for him in his library. About an hour later, his valet came out, and I overheard him calling for an electric cab. Then out came Van Sweller, smiling, but with that sneaky, secretive look in his eye that puzzled me. "I believe," he said casually, as he smoothed his glove, "that I'll go to, for dinner." I sprang up, angered by his words. This, then, was the petty trick he had been planning to play on me. I faced him with a stern look that even his aristocratic poise couldn't shake. "You'll never do that," I exclaimed, "with my permission." "What kind of return is this," I continued, heatedly, "for the favors I've given you? I added a Van to your name when I could have called you Perkins or Simpson. I bragged about your polo ponies, your cars, and the strong muscles you got when you were the lead oarsman in your college team. I created you as the hero of this story, and I won't stand for you ruining it. I've tried to make you a typical young New York gentleman of the highest social status and breeding. You have no reason to complain about how I've treated you. Amy Folliot, the girl you're supposed to win, is a prize for any man, and her beauty can't be matched, assuming the right artist illustrates the story. I don't understand why you're trying to spoil everything. I thought you were a gentleman. What exactly are you objecting to, old man? Asked Van Sweller, sounding surprised. To your dining at 5, I answered. The pleasure would be yours, no doubt, but the responsibility would be on me. You're deliberately making me look like a tout for a restaurant. Where you dine tonight has no connection with the plot. You know very well that the story requires you to be in front of the Alhambra Opera House at 11:30, where you'll rescue Miss Folliot a second time as the fire engine crashes into her cab. Until then, your movements don't matter to the reader. Why can't you dine out of sight somewhere, like many heroes do, instead of insisting on an irrelevant and vulgar display of yourself? My dear fellow, said Van Sweller politely, but with a stubborn tightening of his lips, I'm sorry it doesn't please you, but there's no help for it. Even a character in a story has rights that an author can't ignore. The hero of a story of New York social life must dine at 6, at least once during its action. Must, I echoed, disdainfully. Why must? Who demands it? The magazine editors, answered Van Sweller, giving me a glance of significant warning. But why? I persisted. To please subscribers around Kankakee, Illinois, said Van Sweller without hesitation. How do you know these things? I inquired, with sudden suspicion. You never came into existence until this morning. You're only a character in fiction, anyway. I created you. How is it possible for you to know anything? Pardon me for referring to it, said Van Sweller with a sympathetic smile, but I have been the hero of hundreds of stories of this kind. I felt a slow flush creeping into my face. I stammered, I was hoping, that is. Oh, well, of course, an absolutely original conception in fiction is impossible these days. Metropolitan types, continued Van Sweller kindly, do not offer much room for originality. I've sauntered through every story in pretty much the same way. Now and then, the women writers have made me do some strange things for a gentleman, but the men generally pass me along from one to another without much change. But never yet, in any story, have I failed to dine at 7. You will fail this time, I said emphatically. Perhaps so, admitted Van Sweller, looking out of the window into the street below, but if so, it will be for the first time. The authors all send me there. I fancy that many of them would have liked to accompany me, but for the little matter of the expense. I say I will be touting for no restaurant, I repeated loudly. You are subject to my will, and I declare that you shall not appear on record this evening until the time arrives for you to rescue Miss Folliot again. If the reading public cannot conceive that you have dined during that interval at some one of the thousands of establishments provided for that purpose that do not receive literary advertisement, it may suppose, for all I care, that you have gone fasting. Thank you, said Van Sweller rather coolly, you are hardly courteous. But take care. It is at your own risk that you attempt to disregard a fundamental principle in metropolitan fiction, one that is dear alike to author and reader. I shall, of course, attend to my duty when it comes time to rescue your heroine, but I warn you that it will be your loss if you fail to send me tonight to dine at 6. I will take the consequences if there are to be any, I replied. I am not yet come to be a sandwich man for an eating house. I walked over to a table where I had left my cane and gloves. I heard the whir of the alarm in the cab below, and I turned quickly. Van Sweller was gone. I rushed down the stairs and out to the curb. An empty hansom was just passing. I hailed the driver excitedly. "See that auto cab halfway down the block?" I shouted. "Follow it. Don't lose sight of it for an instant, and I will give you $2. If only I had been one of the characters in my story instead of myself, I could easily have offered $10, $25, or even $100. But $2 was all I felt justified in expending, with fiction at its present rates. The cab driver, instead of lashing his animal into a foam, proceeded at a deliberate trot that suggested a by-the-hour arrangement. But I suspected Van Sweller's design, and when we lost sight of his cab, I ordered my driver to proceed at once to 9. I found Van Sweller at a table under a palm, just glancing over the menu, with a hopeful waiter hovering at his elbow. "Come with me," I said, inexorably. "You will not give me the slip again. Under my eye, you shall remain until 11:30. Van Sweller countermanded the order for his dinner and arose to accompany me. He could scarcely do less. A fictitious character is but poorly equipped for resisting a hungry but live author who comes to drag him forth from a restaurant. All he said was, "You were just in time, but I think you are making a mistake. You cannot afford to ignore the wishes of the great reading public." I took Van Sweller to my own rooms, to my room. He had never seen anything like it before. "Sit on that trunk," I said to him, "while I observe whether the landlady is stalking us. If she is not, I will get things at a delicatessen store below and cook something for you in a pan over the gas jet. It will not be so bad. Of course, nothing of this will appear in the story." "Juba." "Old man," said Van Sweller, looking about him with interest, "this is a jolly little closet you live in. Where the devil do you sleep? Oh, that pulls down. And I say, what is this under the corner of the carpet? Oh, a frying pan. I see, clever idea. Fancy cooking over the gas. What larks it will be. Carpet, oh, a frying pan. I see, clever idea. Fancy cooking over the gas. What larks it will be. Think of anything you could eat?" I asked. "Try a chop, or what?" "Anything," said Van Sweller, enthusiastically, "except a grilled bone." 2 weeks afterward, the postman brought me a large, fat envelope. I opened it and took out something that I had seen before, and this typewritten letter from a magazine that encourages society fiction. "Your short story, The Badge of Policeman Arun, is herewith returned. We are sorry that it has been unfavorably passed upon, but it seems to lack in some of the essential requirements of our publication. The story is splendidly constructed, its style is strong and inimitable, and its action and character drawing deserve the highest praise. As a story per se, it has merit beyond anything that we have read for some time. But, as we have said, it fails to come up to some of the standards we have set. Could you not rewrite the story and inject into it the social atmosphere and return it to us for further consideration? It is suggested to you that you have the hero, Van Sweller, drop in for luncheon or dinner once or twice at 10, or at the 11, which will be in line with the changes desired.